Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon, watching the stars through the main viewport. The ship had been traveling through deep space for 3 months now, mapping new systems and looking for signs of alien life so far. They had found nothing but empty planets and dead rocks floating in the darkness. Jake was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been in space for 20 years, and this mission was supposed to be his last before retirement. He wanted to go home to Earth, to his small house by the lake, and forget about the cold emptiness of space. But duty came first, and Earth needed to know what was out here in the dark. The bridge was quiet, except for the soft hum of the ship's engines. Lisa Hayes sat at her station, checking the sensors for any signs of trouble. She was the ship's tactical officer, a woman in her 30s, with short black hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Next to her, the communications officer watched his screens, hoping for something interesting to break the silence. It was Lisa who first noticed something was wrong. Her console started flashing red lights, and she frowned as she read the data. Scrolling across her screen, "Captain," she said, her voice cutting through the bridge's quiet atmosphere, "I'm picking up something strange. It's not natural." Jake walked over to her station and looked at the readings. The sensors showed energy patterns unlike anything they had seen before. The signals were coming from far away, but they were definitely artificial. Someone or something was out there, and they were trying to communicate. "Can you clean it up?" Jake asked. Lisa worked at her console, adjusting frequencies and filtering out background noise. Slowly, the signals became clearer. They heard next changed everything. The voice that came through the speakers was not human. It spoke in perfect English, but there was something alien about the way it formed words. The tone was desperate, filled with fear and pain. To any sentient species capable of warfare, the voice began. "We are the Kepler Collective, an alliance of 12 species located in the Andromeda Spiral. We face complete extinction and broadcast this message to anyone who might hear it." Jake felt his heart start beating faster. This was it. This was the first contact with alien life that humanity had been waiting for, but the message was not what anyone had expected. "We've tried everything," the alien voice continued. "We attempted diplomacy with our attackers, but they do not listen. We tried to hide on distant worlds, but they found us. We offered them our technology, our resources, even our knowledge, but they want only to destroy us completely." The bridge crew gathered around Lisa's station, listening in stunned silence. The communication officer was recording everything, making sure not to miss a single word. "The enemy calls themselves the Ravagers," the voice went on. "They are a hive mind species that consumes entire civilizations to grow stronger. They have destroyed 17 of our worlds in the past year. Our remaining population is less than 3 billion across all our colonies." Jake looked around at his crew. Everyone was thinking the same thing. These aliens were asking for help, but Earth was far away, and humanity had never fought a war in space before. How could they possibly help against an enemy that had destroyed 17 worlds? "We offer everything we have to any species willing to help us fight," the alien voice said. "Our technology in energy manipulation, faster-than-light communication, and biological enhancement. Our star charts showing safe routes through this galaxy. Even our worlds themselves, if you can save our people." Lisa adjusted the controls again, and more data started coming through. The transmission included technical specifications, star maps, and images of the alien species in the collective. Jake saw beings that looked like living crystals, others that resembled giant insects, and some that seemed to be made of pure energy. "We know this message may never reach anyone who can help," the voice said, "but we must try. If you receive this transmission, and your species has military capabilities, please respond. We will share our location and await your arrival. Is our final plea before our last worlds fall to the Ravagers." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in complete silence. Jake stared at the star maps on Lisa's screen, trying to understand what they had just heard. Somewhere in space, an entire alliance of alien species was facing extinction. They were crying out for help to anyone who might listen. Captain Lisa said quietly, The transmission was broadcast to dozens of star systems. They're not just calling us. They're calling anyone who might be out there. Jake nodded slowly. The aliens didn't know about humanity specifically. They were just sending their message into the void, hoping someone would answer. The question was, should humanity respond? Sir, the communications officer spoke up. Earth's command's standing orders are to observe and report any alien contact. We're supposed to return home immediately and let the government decide what to do. Jake knew the rules. First contact with alien species was too important to handle without proper authorization. But these aliens were dying while Earth's politicians would spend months debating what to do. By the time humanity made a decision, the Kepler collective might be extinct. How long would it take us to reach their location? Jake asked. Lisa checked the star charts. With our current drive system, about 2 months. But Captain, we don't know anything about this war they're fighting. Could be flying into a battle. We can't win. Jake walked back to his command chair and sat down heavily. He thought about his orders, about his duty to Earth, and about his responsibility to his crew. But he also thought about the desperation in that alien voice, about entire civilizations facing extinction while crying out for help. Prepare a response transmission, he said finally. Sir. The communications officer looked surprised. You heard? Me. Tell them that humanity has received their message. Tell them we are willing to discuss an alliance, but we need more information about their enemy and their capabilities. Lisa stood up from her station. Captain Earth Command won't approve of this. We're supposed to return home first. Jake looked at her with tired eyes. Lisa, by the time we get home and Earth makes a decision, these people will be dead. Sometimes you have to do what's right, not what's safe. The communications officer began preparing the response message. Jake dictated humanity's reply, keeping it simple and direct. He identified their species, their home system, and their interest in learning more about the conflict. He also made it clear that any alliance would need to be beneficial to both sides. As the message was transmitted into space, Jake wondered what he had just started. Humanity had never fought aliens before. They had never even met aliens before. But something about that desperate plea had touched him. Maybe it was because he understood what it felt like to be alone in the dark, hoping someone would come to help. 3 weeks later, Jake's decision proved to be the right one. A small alien ship appeared near the horizon, broadcasting peaceful intentions and requesting permission to come aboard. The ship was beautiful, made of what looked like living crystal that changed colors as it moved. The alien who stepped out of the transport pod was unlike anything Jake had ever imagined. Stood 7 feet tall, with a body that seemed to be carved from translucent blue crystal. As it looked around the landing bay, its form shifted through different colors, finally settling on a warm golden hue. I am Zeph, 471 of the Kepler Collective, it said in that same strange accent they had heard in the transmission. I've come to speak with the humans who answered our call. We are grateful that someone heard our plea. Jake shook hands with the alien, feeling the cool, smooth texture of its crystalline skin. This was it. This was the moment that would change humanity's place in the universe forever. They had answered the call for help, and now they would learn what it truly meant. To fight among the stars? 3 weeks after first contact with Zeph 471, Luna Station buzzed with activity like never before. The massive space station orbiting Earth's moon had been quickly converted into a meeting place for the most important diplomatic event in human history. Ships from across the solar system brought scientists, military officers, and government officials to witness the formal negotiations with the Kepler Collective. Admiral Ryan Torres stood in the main conference room, adjusting his dress. Uniform one last time before the aliens arrived. He was a big man with graying hair and scars on his hands from his years fighting in the Titan mining wars. Those battles had been brutal. Fought in the freezing vacuum of space around Saturn's largest moon, but they had taught him how to win. When the odds were against him, next to him stood Dr. Amy Chen, a small woman with bright eyes who had spent her entire career studying the possibility of alien life. She had read every report from the Horizon's first contact, watched every video of the crystal being called Zeph 471, and studied every piece of data the collective had shared. Now she would finally meet them face to face. Colonel Pete Jackson, completed the human delegation. He was younger than the others, with short blonde hair and the kind of calm confidence that came from surviving impossible missions. He had earned his reputation leading Special Forces operations in places where other soldiers could not even survive, let alone fight and win. The doors to the conference room opened, and the alien delegation entered. Zeph 471 led the group, its crystal form now shifting between blue and green colors. Behind it came three other beings that looked nothing like anything on Earth. The first was Veltar, the collective's military advisor. It looked like a giant slug covered in smooth purple skin, with forearms that ended in delicate fingers. Its large black eyes seemed to take in everything at once, and when it moved, it glided across the floor without making any sound. The second alien was Crixnine, who appeared to be made of living metal that constantly shifted and reformed itself. Sometimes it looked like a tall, thin human. Other times like a collection of floating metal pieces held together by some invisible force. When it spoke, its voice sounded like music played on metal instruments. The third was the strangest of all. Null Prime seemed to be made of pure energy contained within a transparent shell. Bolts of electricity danced across its surface, and its voice came from speakers built into the walls rather than from its body. "Welcome to Luna Station," Admiral Torres said, extending his hand to Zeph 471. "We are honored to meet with representatives of the Kepler Collective." Zeph 471's form shifted to a warm golden color as it shook the Admiral's hand. "The honor is ours, Admiral Torres. Your species answered our call when we thought no one would hear us. We hope this meeting will begin a friendship that benefits both our peoples." Dr. Chen stepped forward with a tablet containing humanity's initial proposal. "We've studied the information you provided about the Ravager threat. Our government is prepared to offer a full military alliance in exchange for technological sharing and territorial considerations in the affected regions." Veltar's large eyes focused on the human delegation. "Before we discuss terms, we must understand what your species brings to this conflict. The Ravagers have destroyed civilizations far more advanced than ours. What makes you believe humanity can succeed where others have failed?" Colonel Jackson activated a holographic display that showed footage from human military training exercises. The first video showed soldiers operating in the Arctic, fighting mock battles in temperatures that would kill most Earth creatures within minutes. The next showed underwater combat training, with humans attacking targets while holding their breath for impossible lengths of time. The alien delegates watched in stunned silence as the display continued. They saw human soldiers jumping out of aircraft from heights that should have been fatal, fighting in desert conditions that resembled the surface of Venus, and conducting zero-gravity boarding exercises that required them to cut through solid metal while floating in space. KRIX-9's metal form shifted nervously as it watched human soldiers train with weapons that seemed designed to cause maximum destruction. These combat scenarios, your species practices warfare in environments that would kill most collective members instantly. How is this possible? Dr. Chen smiled and activated another display, this one showing Earth itself. The aliens saw hurricanes that could level entire cities, earthquakes that split the ground open, volcanoes that turned day into night, and winter storms that buried everything under tons of ice and snow. "This is our homeworld," she explained. "Earth is what we call a death world. Every day, our planet tries to kill everything living on it. We evolved not just to survive these conditions, but to thrive in them." Prime's energy form flickered with what might have been excitement or fear. "Your atmospheric pressure is twice what most collective species can survive. Your gravity would crush our crystal form members. The radiation from your sun would burn our energy-based species within hours. That's just the beginning, Colonel," Jackson added. "Our oceans contain creatures that can bite through steel. Our forests are full of predators that hunt in packs. Even our plants have evolved to be poisonous or carnivorous. Every human alive today is descended from ancestors who survived millions of years of the universe trying to kill them." Veltar's smooth skin had turned a darker shade of purple, which Dr. Chen recognized as a sign of distress among its species. "This explains your aggressive military tactics, but are you certain your soldiers can adapt to space warfare?" In the void is different from fighting on a planet's surface. Admiral Torres stepped forward. Colonel, show them the Titan footage. The holographic display changed to show scenes from the Titan mining wars. The aliens watched human soldiers fighting in the methane storms of Saturn's moon, using the frozen landscape and hostile weather as weapons against their enemies. They saw ships ramming each other at full speed, with crew members continuing to fight even as their vessels broke apart around them. The Titan Wars were fought over mining rights, Torres explained. Both sides were human. We fought each other for 3 years in conditions that would kill most species instantly. The war only ended when both sides realized they were spending more resources fighting than they could ever mine from the moon. Zeph-471's crystal form had shifted to a silver-white color that indicated shock or fear. Your species fights wars against itself for economic reasons. In environments that are inherently lethal, we fight wars for lots of reasons, Jackson said simply. Resources, territory, ideology, sometimes just because we don't like each other. But the important thing is that we know how to win them. The room fell silent as the alien delegates processed what they had learned. Finally, Veltar spoke up. Your military capabilities are ... impressive. But war is not just about fighting. It requires strategy, logistics, coordination between different forces. How do we know your species can work with ours? Dr. Chen pulled up another display, this one showing human disaster relief operations. When our cities are destroyed by earthquakes or hurricanes, we rebuild them. When our people are trapped by floods or avalanches, we rescue them. When diseases threaten our population, we develop cures. Humans don't just know how to fight and destroy, we know how to protect and save. Admiral Torres leaned forward across the conference table. The Ravagers see your people as prey because you evolved on peaceful worlds. You built civilizations based on cooperation and shared knowledge. That's not weakness, that's strength. But when predators come, you need guardians. And that's what we are, Jackson added. Every human military unit trains with the same motto. We fight so others don't have to. We're willing to face the dangerous things in the universe so that peaceful species like yours can continue to build and create and explore. Crix-9's metal form stabilized into something resembling a human shape. If we agree to this alliance, how would the war be conducted? The Ravagers fight using traditional galactic warfare doctrine. Large fleets engage at long range with ground forces establishing defensive positions and holding territory. Colonel Jackson smiled, and there was something in that expression that made the aliens uncomfortable. That's their mistake. They're fighting the kind of war they understand, the kind that works against civilized species who follow rules and try to minimize casualties. But we're not civilized in the way you think of civilization. What do you mean? Zeph-471 asked, its form shifting to yellow with curiosity. We mean that when humans go to war, we don't fight fair, Torres said. We don't establish defensive positions and wait for the enemy to attack them. We find out where the enemy is, we figure out how to hurt them, and then we hurt them until they stop being a threat. Dr. Chen activated one final display, showing historical footage from Earth's wars. The aliens saw human soldiers using camouflage to become invisible, setting traps that turned the enemy's own weapons against them, and launching surprise attacks from directions that should have been impossible. This is how Deathworlders fight. She explained, we use everything around us as a weapon. We turn our enemies' strengths into weaknesses, and we never, ever give up. 6 months after the Treaty of Luna was signed, the war began in earnest. The human fleet arrived at the edge of the Kepler 7 system to find a nightmare unfolding before them. 3 billion civilians were trapped on the planet's surface while massive Ravager ships circled overhead like vultures, slowly wearing down the defensive shields that protected the cities below. Commodore Alex Turner stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching the enemy fleet through the main viewport. The ship was a marvel of human and alien engineering combined. With Earth's military design enhanced by collective energy systems that made it faster and more powerful than anything humanity had built before, how long have they been under siege? Turner asked his tactical officer. 8 weeks, sir, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim replied, studying the data on her screens. The Ravagers have been conducting a slow bombardment, wearing down the shields bit by bit. At current rates, the defenses will fail in another 2 weeks. Turner nodded grimly. This was exactly what the collective had described during the treaty negotiations. The Ravagers fought methodical wars, using overwhelming force to slowly crush their enemies. It was effective against civilizations that fought by the same rules. But Turner had no intention of playing by those rules. The human battle group consisted of 12 ships, each commanded by officers who had proven themselves. In the brutal conditions of space warfare, Captain Nina Ross commanded the UES Wildfire, a fast attack vessel designed for close combat. Captain Ben Clark led the UES Thunder, loaded with human marines trained for hostile environment operations. Captain Sam Miller's ship, the UES Vanguard, carried the new hybrid weapons that combined human explosive technology with collective energy systems. "Signal all ships," Turner ordered. "We're going in." The Ravager fleet consisted of 30 massive vessels, each one larger than the biggest human ship. They had been conducting their siege from a safe distance, exactly as Galactic warfare doctrine recommended. Their ships were designed for long-range combat, with heavy armor and powerful weapons that could destroy enemies from thousands of kilometers away. What they were not designed for was what happened next. Captain Ross's ship, DU's Wildfire, suddenly disappeared from its position and reappeared directly in the middle of the Ravager formation. The micro-jump had placed her ship less than a kilometer from the nearest enemy vessel, so close that their long-range weapons could not target her effectively. The Wildfire opened fire with everything it had. Human projectile weapons punched through Ravager armor while collective energy beams sliced through their holes like paper. Before the enemy could react, Ross launched boarding pods directly at the closest ship. The boarding pods were a human invention that horrified even their allies. Instead of trying to dock safely with enemy ships, the pods used explosive charges to blast holes through enemy holes, then deposited human marines directly into the breach. The marines wore heavy armor that could survive in vacuum and carried weapons designed to work in zero gravity. The Ravagers had never faced boarding tactics before. Their ships were designed to fight other ships, not to repel invaders who appeared suddenly inside their holes. Within minutes, human marines were fighting their way through the corridors of 3 different Ravager vessels. "Ships, execute." "Thunder Protocol," Turner commanded. The rest of the human fleet followed Ross's lead, micro-jumping into the enemy formation and engaging at point-blank range. The space around Kepler 7 erupted into chaos as human ships darted between the much larger Ravager vessels. Too close and too fast for the enemy's heavy weapons to track Captain Clark's ship. The EU's Thunder took the most dangerous mission. Instead of attacking the Ravager's ships, he flew directly toward the planet's surface. His ship was filled with human marines who had volunteered for the most insane mission anyone had ever proposed: a ground assault on a planet with an atmosphere. That would kill most species instantly. Kepler 7's atmosphere contained acids that could dissolve metal in temperatures that shifted between freezing and boiling depending on the time of day. The planet's surface was covered with creatures that the collective considered too dangerous to approach. It was, by any reasonable standard, uninhabitable, which made it perfect for humans. Clark's Marines dropped onto the planet in heavily armored pods that crashed through the toxic atmosphere like meteors. They emerged wearing environmental suits that had been tested in Earth's most hostile locations: the bottom of the ocean, peaks of the highest mountains, and the depths of active volcanoes. Sergeant Dan Cooper was the first human to set foot on Kepler 7. He looked around at the acid-burned landscape and the strange creatures moving in the distance, then activated his communication system. "Command, this is Cooper. We are on the surface and operational. The locals don't look friendly, but neither do we." The human ground assault began immediately. Instead of establishing defensive positions like the collective expected, the Marines split into small groups and disappeared into the hostile landscape. They used the planet's dangerous fauna as weapons, driving acid-spitting creatures toward Ravager ground positions. They turned the toxic weather into tactical advantages, launching attacks during acid storms when the enemy could not see them. Coming Dr. Sarah Kim, who had been assigned as a liaison between human and collective forces, watched the battle from a safe distance aboard a collective observation ship. She was documenting everything for the historical record. But what she saw challenged everything she thought she knew about warfare. "This is incredible," she spoke into her recording device. "Human forces have been fighting continuously for 72 hours without rest. They are operating in an environment that should kill them, using tactics that appear to have no strategic logic, and yet they are winning." The collective observers aboard the ship were having difficulty understanding what they were witnessing. The battle looked like chaos, with human ships appearing and disappearing unpredictably, while human soldiers fought in conditions that made no sense. How are they surviving on that planet's surface? SF 471. Its crystal form shifting. Through colors of confusion and amazement. "They are not just surviving," Kim replied, watching her instruments. "They're thriving. Human heart rates and stress indicators show they are actually enjoying this." In space, the battle was going equally. Well, for the human fleet, the Ravager ships, designed for methodical long-range combat, were helpless against the aggressive close-quarters attacks. Human ships would appear next to them, unleash devastating firepower, and disappear before the enemy could respond effectively. Miller's ship demonstrated the new hybrid weapons technology. His energy cannons, powered by collective technology, but designed according to human principles, could punch through Ravager armor in a single shot. His missile systems used human explosive warheads guided by collective navigation systems, making them nearly impossible to intercept. But it was not just the technology that was winning the battle. It was the human approach to warfare itself. Turner watched as one of his ships, badly damaged and leaking atmosphere, rammed directly into a Ravager vessel twice its size. The collision destroyed both ships, but the human crew had evacuated in escape pods just seconds before impact, while the Ravager crew had no time to react. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the Ravager fleet. They're requesting terms for surrender." Turner almost smiled. In 8 months of siege warfare, the Ravagers had never considered surrender, but they had never fought humans before. "Tell them we accept their surrender," he said, "but make it clear that if they ever threaten collective worlds again, we'll be back." The siege of Kepler 7 ended with complete human victory. 30 Ravager ships had been destroyed or captured, while the human fleet had lost only 2 vessels. More importantly, 3 billion collective civilians were safe. And the Ravagers had experienced their first defeat in recorded history, as the human ships prepared to return home. Dr. Kim finished her report on the battle. "The psychological impact of human warfare appears to affect both allies and enemies," she wrote. "Collective observers describe our tactics as beautifully terrifying, while intercepted Ravager communications show evidence of genuine fear for the first time in their species' history." On the surface of Kepler 7, Sergeant Cooper and his Marines were preparing to leave the planet. They had spent 3 days fighting in conditions that would have killed most galactic species, and they looked like they could fight for 3 more. "How do you feel about your first alien planet?" Cooper asked one of his younger soldiers. The Marine looked around at the acid-burned landscape, the strange creatures still watching them from a distance, and the smoking ruins of Ravager positions. "Honestly, Sergeant, it reminds me of home." Cooper laughed and activated his transport beacon. The humans were going home. But they had left something behind on Kepler 7, the knowledge that there was now a species in the galaxy that fought wars. The way predators hunted prey, with intelligence, creativity, and absolute refusal to give up, the Ravagers had learned what it meant to fight Deathworlders. They would not forget the lesson anytime soon. The Ravager overmind existed across thousands of ships and millions of individual creatures, all connected through a single shared consciousness that had never known defeat. For 3,000 years, it had expanded across 17 galaxies, consuming civilizations and adding their knowledge to its collective intelligence. It had faced energy beings, machine intelligences, countless biological species, defeating them all with overwhelming force and methodical precision. But now, for the first time in its existence, the Overmind experienced something new: fear. Defeat at Kepler 7 had sent shockwaves through the Ravager fleet. Ships that had fought for centuries without retreating suddenly found themselves fleeing from enemies a fraction of their size. The humans fought like nothing the Overmind had ever encountered, using tactics that made no logical sense but somehow worked with devastating effectiveness. The Overmind analyzed every second of the battle, studying the human ships that appeared and disappeared without warning, the boarding tactics that violated every principle of space combat and the ground. Assault on a planet that should have been impossible to invade. What it discovered disturbed it deeply. These humans were not just another species to be consumed. They were predators, evolved on a world so hostile that survival required constant warfare against their own environment. They did not fight to conquer or expand like civilized species. They fought to destroy threats completely and permanently. The Overmind made a decision that would have been unthinkable. Before meeting humans, it recalled fleets from 12 different sectors, abandoning conquests that had taken decades to achieve. Over 10,000 Ravager ships began converging on human space, carrying weapons and creatures that had destroyed entire star systems. If these Deathworlders wanted a war, the Overmind would give them a war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. On Earth, President Maria Santos stood before the Global Defense Council in the rebuilt United Nations building in New York. The chamber was filled with representatives from every nation, colony, and space habitat that humanity had established. Outside the windows, the city bustled with activity as 11 billion people prepared for the largest military mobilization in human history. The Ravager response has exceeded our worst projections, Santos announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. Intelligence reports indicate over 10,000 enemy ships are moving toward our territory. This is not a raid or a limited engagement. This is an attempt at complete extermination. General Troy Adams, now Supreme Commander of Human Forces, stepped forward to address the council. He was a man who had earned his reputation in the asteroid mining conflicts, where battles were fought in conditions that would kill unprotected humans in seconds. His scarred hands and gray hair spoke of decades spent in the most dangerous places humans could reach. The enemy believes they can destroy us using traditional overwhelming force, Adams said. They are bringing more ships than any single species has ever faced. They are making the same mistake every enemy has made when fighting humans. They think this is about ships and weapons. Santos activated a holographic display that showed the entire solar system. Red markers indicated human military positions on every planet, moon, asteroid, and space station, from Mercury to the outer colonies beyond Pluto. We are not implementing traditional defensive strategies, she continued. We are activating the Total War Protocol. Every human settlement, every civilian installation, every research station and mining platform will become part of our military response. The representatives watched in amazement as the display showed the transformation taking place across human space. Mining ships were being converted into missile carriers, their industrial equipment repurposed to launch clouds of projectiles at enemy formations. Research stations were becoming weapons platforms, their scientific instruments turned into targeting systems for experimental weapons. Even merchant vessels were receiving military upgrades, their cargo holds filled with everything from guided missiles to human volunteers willing to ram enemy ships. The transformation was happening with a speed that astonished even humanity's own leaders. Captain Eva White commanded the defense of the Proxima Centauri system, humanity's first interstellar colony. She stood on the bridge of her flagship, the U.S. Defiance, watching as the largest Ravager fleet ever assembled dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of her system. The enemy force was overwhelming. 300 Ravager ships, each one larger and more heavily armed than anything in White's fleet. By every principle of military strategy, she should have requested reinforcements or ordered an evacuation. Instead, she did something that would become legendary in human military history. All ships, prepare for the Proxima Gambit, he announced over the communication system. White's fleet consisted of 37 ships, a mixture of military vessels and converted civilian craft. The odds were almost 10-1 against them. But White had studied the reports from Kepler 7. She understood that humans did not win battles by fighting fair. They won by fighting in ways their enemies could never predict or understand. The Ravager fleet approached in the traditional formation, expecting the humans to either flee or establish defensive positions around the colony. What they encountered, instead, was something that defied all military logic. White's entire fleet accelerated directly toward the enemy at maximum speed. Instead of trying to engage from a safe distance, every human ship became a guided missile, aimed at the heart of the Ravager formation. At the last possible moment, the ships launched every fighter, every missile, and every piece of military equipment they carried, and continued their collision course. The Ravager commanders had never faced suicide tactics on such a scale. Individual ships ramming larger vessels was one thing, but an entire fleet turning itself into projectiles was beyond their comprehension. Their formations scattered as ship after ship collided with their vessels, each impact followed by massive explosions that damaged multiple enemy ships. Captain White's own ship, the Defiance, survived its ramming attack long enough for her to broadcast a final message. "This is what humans do when you threaten our homes. We turn ourselves into weapons." The Battle of Proxima lasted for hours and resulted in the destruction of both fleets, but the casualty ratio was 12-1 in humanity's favor. 300 Ravager ships were destroyed or disabled. While White's sacrifice had saved the Proxima colony and sent a message that echoed across the galaxy, Dr. Amy Chen, working from a research facility on Mars, had been studying captured Ravager specimens and intercepted communications. Her discoveries would change the course of the entire war. The Ravager hive mind is their greatest strength, but also their greatest weakness, she explained to General Adams via secure transmission. Their shared consciousness allows perfect coordination between thousands of ships, but it also makes them vulnerable to psychological warfare in ways they cannot understand. Chen had developed a strategy that used human unpredictability as a weapon. She began broadcasting recordings of human war songs, battle cries, and tactical communications directly at Ravager fleets. The chaotic, emotional nature of human warfare caused disruptions in the Ravager collective consciousness. They evolved as a hive mind that processes information logically and systematically, Chen continued. But human emotions, human creativity, human irrationality creates patterns they cannot predict or counter. We are literally giving them the equivalent of a mental breakdown. The strategy was implemented across all human forces. Before every battle, human ships would broadcast recordings of Earth's most violent music, the sounds of human crowds cheering, and the voices of human soldiers promising to never surrender. The effect on Ravager forces was immediate and dramatic. Ravager ships began making tactical errors, their perfect coordination disrupted by the chaotic input from human transmissions. Some vessels would break formation without orders, while others would engage in combat when they should have retreated. The hive mind that had conquered 17 galaxies was learning what it meant to face an enemy that fought with pure emotion as well as tactical skill. The war reached its climax at the Wolf 359 system, where Admiral Ryan Torres led the largest combined human collective fleet ever assembled against the main Ravager armada. The battle lasted for days and became the largest space engagement in galactic history. Torres commanded from the bridge of his flagship, the UES Humanity's Will, watching as human and alien ships fought side by side against an enemy that had never known defeat. The collective vessels provided long-range support and advanced technology. While human ships carried out the close combat attacks that had become their signature, the battle was brutal, beyond description. Ships on both sides were destroyed by the hundreds. Space around Wolf 359 became a graveyard of twisted metal and floating debris. But human forces, enhanced by collective technology and driven by their refusal to accept defeat, slowly gained the upper hand. 1 year after the Treaty of Luna changed everything, the war reached its final chapter. The Ravager Overmind, now operating with only 30% of its original fleet strength, made a decision born of desperation and fear. If it could not defeat these Deathworlders through conventional warfare, it would strike at the heart of their civilization and force them to surrender. The attack began with a transmission broadcast across every human communication frequency. The voice of the Overmind, speaking through millions of creatures acting as one, reached every person in human space simultaneously. Humans of the death world called Earth, the alien voice said, cold and mechanical, yet somehow filled with grudging respect. We have consumed 1,000 civilizations across 17 galaxies. We've absorbed the knowledge of countless species and defeated enemies you cannot imagine. God, you Deathworlders fight with a fury that defies all logic and reason. On Earth, President Maria Santos stood in the Emergency Command Center deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, surrounded by military leaders and government officials from across the solar system. The massive screens around them showed Ravager fleets emerging from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system, more ships than had ever been assembled in one place. We offer you terms that we have never offered before, the Overmind continued. Join us willingly, add your strength to ours, and we will spare your world and your people. You will rule alongside us as we spread across the galaxy, bringing order to chaos and unity to division. Santos looked around the command center at the faces of humanity's leaders. Some showed fear, others determination, but all of them were waiting for her response. She stepped forward to the communication console and activated the broadcast system that would carry her words. To every human in the solar system, I speak for all humanity when I say this, Santos began, her voice steady and clear. We didn't crawl out of Earth's gravity well to kneel to anyone. We didn't survive ice ages and plagues and wars just to surrender to something that's afraid of us. You want Earth? Come and take it. The Battle of Earth began immediately. Ravager ships poured into the solar system like a tide of destruction, their weapons blazing as they advanced, toward the blue-green world that had produced the most dangerous species they had ever encountered. But Earth was ready for them, Admiral. Jake Morrison, promoted after his first contact success, commanded the orbital defenses from the space station Luna Prime. His hair was completely gray now, and his face showed the stress of leading humanity's forces through a year of brutal warfare, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. All stations, this is Morrison, he announced over the command frequency. The enemy is coming home to us. Show them what that means? The first surprise came when the Ravager fleet reached the asteroid belt. What should have been empty space filled with rocks and mining stations suddenly erupted with weapons fire. Every asteroid had been hollowed out and filled with missiles. Every mining platform had been converted into a gun battery, and the entire belt had become a massive defensive fortress. Captain Lisa Hayes, now commanding the defense coordination from Ceres Station, watched as thousands of projectiles launched from concealed positions throughout the asteroid field. The Ravagers had expected to find scattered mining operations. Instead, they found themselves flying through a maze of weapons platforms that turned their own superior numbers against them. Target the large formations, Hayes ordered. Let them bunch up, then hit them with everything we have. But the real shock came when Ravager ships broke through the asteroid belt and approached Earth itself, expected to find a planet cowering behind defensive shields with civilians evacuating to underground shelters. What they found instead challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare. Earth's population was not hiding. 11 billion humans were actively participating in the planet's defense. Teenage hackers in bedrooms across 6 continents launched cyber attacks that crashed Ravager navigation systems. Elderly veterans emerged from retirement to man anti-aircraft. Guns mounted on skyscrapers. Children helped coordinate refugee movements while enemy ships flew overhead, treating the invasion like a massive emergency drill they had been practicing their entire lives. Commander Pete Jackson, now leading Special Forces operations worldwide, established his command post in the ruins of what had once been Chicago. The city had been partially destroyed in the first wave of attacks, but instead of surrendering, the population had turned the wreckage into a fortress. Enemy forces are landing in Sector 7, his communications officer reported. Jackson smiled grimly. Good. Send them the welcome package. The welcome package consisted of everything humans had learned about fighting in hostile environments. Ravager ground forces found themselves facing enemies who emerged from storm drains, attacked from the tops of damaged buildings, and used the city's own infrastructure as weapons. Human defenders turned subway tunnels into ambush points, used the electrical grid to electrify metal surfaces that alien invaders might touch, and even trained local wildlife to carry small explosive charges to enemy positions. The battle for Earth cities became a nightmare for an enemy that had never faced. Urban warfare conducted by an entire civilian population, Dr. Amy Chen, now working from a mobile command center that moved constantly to avoid enemy detection, made the discovery that would end the war. She had been monitoring Ravager communications throughout the battle, and what she found astonished her. "General Adams," she called over the secure communication link, "I think I understand what's happening. The Ravagers aren't just losing this battle, they're learning something about us that terrifies them more than our weapons." Adams, coordinating the global defense from his bunker beneath the Pentagon, listened as Chen explained her discovery. "The Overmind evolved to consume civilizations that surrender when facing overwhelming odds," she said. "Every species they've ever encountered has a breaking point where they give up and accept defeat, but humans don't have that breaking point. We literally don't know how to quit." The truth of Chen's words became clear as the battle continued. Ravager forces captured human military bases, only to find that the soldiers regrouped and continued fighting from the surrounding countryside. They destroyed human ships, only to watch as the surviving crew members used escape pods to ram enemy vessels. They overwhelmed human defensive positions, only to discover that civilians had already prepared secondary and tertiary defensive lines. Admiral Morrison, now commanding from the surface after his space station was destroyed, broadcast a message that reached every human communication device on the planet and every ship in the solar system. "This is Admiral Morrison to all human forces," he said. "Standing in the rubble of what had been the world's largest spaceport, we are the species that looked at a world trying to kill us and decided to make it home. We are the species that stared into the void between stars and lit fires to push back the darkness. We don't know how to surrender because our ancestors never learned that word." The message was broadcast on all frequencies, including those the Ravagers were monitoring. What the aliens heard was not a military communication, but something far more dangerous, the voice of a species that saw impossible odds as just another. Tuesday, the turning point came during the third day of the battle. The Ravager Overmind, faced with an enemy that grew more dangerous as their situation became more desperate, experienced something that had never happened in its 3,000-year existence. Doubt it had thrown everything at these. It had brought weapons that could crack planets, creatures that could survive in the vacuum of space, and tactics that had destroyed civilizations far more advanced than humanity. But the humans just kept fighting. When human cities were bombed, the survivors used the rubble as cover for counterattacks. When human fleets were destroyed, individual ships continued fighting until they were literally blown apart. When human soldiers ran out of ammunition, they picked up rocks and metal pipes and kept fighting with primitive weapons. The Overmind realized it was facing something unprecedented, a species that turned desperation into strength, that used their own losses as motivation to fight harder, and that seemed to actually enjoy combat more when the odds were against them. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Ravager Overmind made a strategic retreat, not because it was losing the battle, but because it finally understood what kind of enemy it was fighting. The final transmission from the Overmind came as its ships began withdrawing from the solar system. "We withdraw from your territory and agree to a non-aggression pact with your species. We have never encountered beings like you. You are not a civilization to be conquered. You are a force of nature to be avoided." 6 months later, Admiral Ryan Torres stood before the newly formed Galactic Council as the first human representative. To the interstellar community, the ceremony was taking place on Luna Station, which had been rebuilt and expanded to serve as the headquarters for galactic defense operations.